It was a cloudy morning in Greenfield, a small town in the heart of the United States, where everything seemed to move at a slow pace. The quiet streets were lined with old trees, and the houses exuded a welcoming simplicity. There were no tall buildings, no heavy traffic, and no grand events. Life followed its own rhythm, and those who lived there enjoyed that calm atmosphere, as if they were protected from the commotion of the outside world. On Maple Street, one of the oldest roads in Greenfield, there stood a house with peeling paint and dusty windows, giving the impression that no one had set foot there in a long time. Dry leaves had piled up on the porch, and part of the wooden fence was broken. It seemed like a forgotten place until something caught the neighborhood's attention. A yellow-furred dog sitting in front of that house, staring fixedly at the road, as though waiting for someone. This dog's name was Buddy. No one knew where Buddy had come from. He simply appeared one day without warning and chose that porch to stay. Instead of wandering the streets like so many strays, Buddy took up his post there, keeping watch. There was something in his eyes that revealed a profound longing, though people could never guess its cause. Sometimes he would stand up and walk in circles near the fence, but he would soon return to the same spot, gazing out at the horizon once again. The residents began noticing his presence. Some would pass by and wave to the dog, but Buddy would only twitch his ears, alert to every distant engine sound. Some said he had been abandoned. Others believed that perhaps his family had moved away and forgotten him. There were even rumors of a possible accident involving Buddy's owners. Whatever the theories, the truth was that the dog would not leave that spot day after day, night after night, as though he had a clear mission to wait for the return of someone very dear. As the weeks went by, Buddy's story spread throughout Greenfield. No one could understand how a dog could display such persistence, enduring cold and rain without leaving that place. The children talked about him at school, intrigued by the behavior of the dog on Maple Street. Adults more experienced felt sorry for him and offered help whenever they could. The local grocer started leaving bags of dog food on the sidewalk so Buddy wouldn't go hungry. The owner of the town's cafe put out bowls of fresh water near the gate for him to drink. Even as he received these gestures of kindness, Buddy showed no intention of changing his address. Some people tried to adopt him. Tom Hamilton, who lived on a nearby farm, tried to coax him into the car, promising a huge yard to run around in and other canine friends to play with. Buddy, however, refused. When Tom slipped a leash around his neck, the dog squirmed, flattened his ears, and backed away, his gaze a mix of fear and resolve. As soon as he was free, he went right back to the porch. Tom realized that good intentions weren't enough. Buddy had an invisible bond with that place. Time went on, and Buddy's loyalty grew more impressive by the day. Every single day there he was, as if he knew that at any moment a car would stop in front of the old house and someone would get out to greet him. Not many cars went down Maple Street, but once in a while a different vehicle appeared, and Buddy would immediately perk up, raising his ears and focusing his gaze. When he realized it was not the person he expected, he sank back into a downcast posture, lying once again on the porch's worn planks. Mrs. Mitchell, a white-haired widow who lived across from the abandoned house, watched Buddy with growing concern. She lived alone and often observed the comings and goings on the street from her window. She felt sorry when she noticed that the dog was getting thinner, as no one was always there to feed him. So she began bringing him a plate of food every morning. She would approach slowly, speak to him in a gentle voice, and place the plate a few steps away. Buddy would eat, and then go right back to his spot, looking at the asphalt, attentive to any noise in the distance. When he finished chewing, he would glance over at Mrs. Mitchell with what seemed like gratitude in his eyes. In response, she would give him a discreet pat on the head. Buddy barely moved, but her gesture was met with a slight lick of her hand. A silent pact slowly formed between them. She provided him support, and he continued to wait. Meanwhile, new rumors circled about the dog's past. Some claimed Buddy had belonged to a family called Carter, who had suffered a bad car accident and never returned. Others said the owners had been forced to leave because of financial problems and somehow lost Buddy in the process. There were even those who speculated that the family had gone on vacation and simply decided not to come back. No one had any proof, but each theory made it clear that Buddy acted with a purpose no one could fully explain. On the next street lived Emily, a curious 9-year-old girl. She always walked past the house after school and noticed Buddy's lonely demeanor. Though she was still a child, she was sensitive and had a special affection for animals. She couldn't have a dog at home because her father was allergic, but that did nothing to lessen her love for them. She wanted to understand why Buddy wouldn't leave that place, why he seemed so determined. One day, Emily saved up her allowance and bought a pack of dog biscuits. Heart pounding with excitement, she decided to try and approach Buddy. At first, she was a little afraid of being rejected. What if the dog didn't trust her or growled at her? But as she came closer slowly, she sat on a lower porch step, held out the treats in her hand, and whispered, "Hi, Buddy, I brought you some biscuits." The dog lifted his head, sniffing the air. He came closer, drawn by curiosity and hunger alike. He took the treats, chewed them, and licked his lips. Emily was overjoyed to see that he trusted her enough to accept her offering. Then, Buddy went back to the center of the porch, not fleeing from the girl. Emily felt that somehow she had been welcomed into the silent world of this dog. Days passed, and Emily kept showing up after school. She always brought treats or a small blanket on colder days. She would sit beside Buddy and talk to him about her everyday life, her classes, her recess games, her friends, her favorite subjects. It didn't matter that Buddy couldn't talk. Emily believed he understood every word. In return, Buddy would sometimes rest his head on her knee, as if to say he appreciated her company. Over time, Buddy allowed Emily to pet him more frequently. She scratched behind his ears, and he closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the affection. Even so, if any adult tried to put him in a car or take him someplace else, he firmly refused, returning to the porch. Whether out of instinct, loyalty, or love, Buddy believed that his missing family would be found right there. In the neighborhood, the story began to take on the air of a local legend. People recognized in Buddy's loyalty a rare kind of strength. Some were touched in a way that made them reflect on their own lives, on how often we give up on something important when difficulties arise. Buddy, however, seemed not to have given up. Year after year, the dog remained steadfast. As time went on, he aged, but the hope in his eyes never faded. On a sunny Saturday, Emily arrived with news for Buddy. She had discovered something. She had spoken to Mrs. Wilson, an 80-year-old woman who had lived in Greenfield for decades. The elderly lady said that once, long ago, a family had lived in that house, a couple with a boy named Daniel. She recalled they had left in a hurry during a difficult time, and little was known of their fate afterward. Mrs. Wilson wasn't entirely sure of all the details, but her story fit the idea that Buddy had once belonged to that family. Emily rushed to Buddy and excitedly told him everything, even though he couldn't grasp every word. She told him about Daniel, the possible disappearance, and her wish to find more clues to help. She wanted Buddy to have a happy ending. She was only 9, but she had enormous determination. She believed that Buddy's love deserved closure. In the meantime, Emily's mother, seeing her daughter's effort, decided to help. She went around asking older neighbors if they remembered the family's name or any detail that might shed light on their whereabouts. Most people couldn't recall anything concrete, but some thought the family's surname might have been Johnson or Daniels. Others got dates and names mixed up, unable to provide any solid information. The house had been abandoned for so long that its history seemed swept into some forgotten corner of the world. Undeterred, Emily decided to search the house itself. She had never had the courage to go in before, but that week she noticed the back door was ajar. She called Buddy to go with her. He followed, curious. Inside, windows covered by old newspapers blocked most of the light, and the air smelled of mildew. She walked into a living room full of furniture, draped with sheets that had yellowed with dust. On top of a small table lay some papers and a few photographs. Emily blew off the thick layer of dust, revealing a photo in which a boy was holding a Labrador puppy that looked a lot like Buddy. Behind them, the house had the same paint color, except well cared for, with flower pots on the porch. In another picture, the same boy appeared alongside a couple, all smiling. It was without a doubt the family that once lived there. Emily felt a tightness in her chest, imagining how many happy memories were preserved in those photos, now left to dust and time. Buddy sniffed the pictures, as though he recognized a familiar scent. His eyes shone brighter than usual, and he let out a soft whine. Feeling moved, Emily carefully gathered the photos, planning to show them to her parents in the hope they might find a way to locate the family. In the following days, Emily and her mother visited City Hall, the library, and spoke to anyone who might be able to help. They discovered that the house had indeed belonged to a family with a young son, but there were no precise records of where they'd moved. Some documents suggested they might have relocated to another region of the United States, but nothing definitive. Meanwhile, Emily went online to post about Buddy, sharing the story of the faithful dog that had spent years waiting in the same spot. She asked anyone with information about the family to come forward. Each dead-end search threatened to bring discouragement, but Emily refused to give up. She remembered Buddy, who had never abandoned hope, and that motivated her to continue. People in nearby neighborhoods began talking about the case. Some drivers passing through Maple Street would pull over just to see Buddy and leave him a bag of kibble or encouraging words. The fame of the city's most loyal dog grew. Then one day, a man named Mr. Bradley came forward, saying he had worked as a school bus driver many years ago. He claimed to have old enrollment records, which he kept as souvenirs from that time. He asked to see the photos Emily had found in the house. Upon looking at the boy in the pictures, he connected him to a student named Daniel Johnson, who had ridden his bus about 4 years prior. That revelation sparked huge hope. Emily compared names and dates, and everything pointed to it being the same boy. Mr. Bradley searched his files and found a note that Daniel's family had left the city because the father had a serious illness requiring specialized treatment in another state. There was no mention of any accident, but it made sense that Buddy could have gone missing in the chaos of moving. Excited, Emily shared the story widely on social media, including photos of Daniel and his father in front of the house, hoping someone might have a current contact for them. Days went by, the story spread by word of mouth, and finally a phone call came in. It was a woman named Lisa Johnson, who said she was Daniel's aunt. She had received Emily's post from someone else and was moved to recognize her nephew and the old family home in the pictures. Lisa explained that Daniel's father had indeed had major health problems and nearly lost his life. The family had to move quickly to begin treatment. Buddy was with them, but disappeared during the moving process. It was a harsh blow for everyone because Daniel loved the dog, but they had no way of returning to Greenfield. Over time, amid treatments and financial troubles, they settled in a different city. Lisa said Daniel still missed Buddy dearly, but they had no clues as to where he might be. Emily was thrilled. After so many attempts, there was a real possibility of a reunion. She spoke to Lisa, who promised to notify Daniel's parents. If everyone agreed, they would travel to Greenfield to see Buddy. Meanwhile, the news spread once more through the neighborhood. It looked like the dog's wait was finally coming to an end. Excitement ran high. Despite the house being old and abandoned, many neighbors decided to clear the porch a bit, get rid of the cobwebs and leaves, so the meeting would be more comfortable for everyone. On a clear Sunday morning, an unfamiliar car pulled up to the house. Under the watchful, anxious eyes of the gathered neighbors, a man, a woman, and a somewhat shy-looking boy stepped out. The boy could only be Daniel, taller now than in the photos. The father walked slowly, leaning on a cane, a sign that his health was still fragile. The mother's face showed both relief and apprehension. They seemed unsure if Buddy would still be there. Before they could even reach the gate, Buddy stood up immediately. He sniffed the air as though his heart recognized each of them. His ears perked up, and he darted from his usual spot, running toward the trio. In seconds, Daniel saw him and called out his name, arms wide open. Buddy leaped up, whimpering with delight, licking the boy's hands and face, as if he was still the little boy in the photos who had never forgotten his friend. The scene was so moving that no one around could hold back tears. Daniel dropped to his knees, hugging Buddy as though he wanted to make up for every lost moment of the past few years. The father and mother also knelt down, stroking the dog, whispering apologies and promises that they would never leave him behind again. The onlookers stood by in respectful silence, deeply touched by the strength of that reunion. Emily was nearby, tears running down her cheeks. Though she was overjoyed for Buddy, she also felt a pang of sadness, realizing she would soon no longer see that loyal dog on the porch. Still, she understood that his rightful place was with his family. She smiled warmly as Daniel's mother came over to thank her. "Because of you, we finally found Buddy. We can't put into words how grateful we are." After embracing Buddy and making up for lost time, Daniel's family explained to the neighbors that they planned on driving home that same day because Daniel's father still had medical appointments in another city. They asked if Buddy was in good enough shape for the journey. Almost as if to answer, Buddy jumped right into the back seat as soon as Daniel opened the car door. He seemed unwilling to lose sight of his owner ever again. The neighbors waved them off with tearful eyes. Emily approached the car to give Buddy one last hug. He nudged his nose against her face, as if trying to say, "Thank you for everything." When the car started moving, Buddy stuck his head out the window and glanced back at the porch for the last time. Perhaps he felt that this chapter in his life was finally closing. In the days that followed, the Maple Street house felt quieter than ever. Buddy's spot was empty. For Emily, it was hard to walk by and not see him. She missed him deeply, but also felt great happiness, knowing that this was the best possible outcome for him. Sometimes Mrs. Mitchell would stop and say to Emily, "At least now he's where he belongs, isn't he?" Emily agreed, trying not to get emotional. Weeks turned into months, and a letter arrived addressed to Emily's house. It was from Daniel, telling her how Buddy was settling into their new home. He wrote that his father was slowly recovering, and that Buddy now ran around in a spacious yard, slept under the kitchen table, and was petted by the whole family. He enclosed pictures of Buddy happily chasing a ball, and promised they would visit Greenfield as soon as they could. Emily treasured these photos, recalling everything they had gone through together. Buddy's story also left a permanent mark on the town. A group of volunteers had a small metal plaque made, which they affixed to the porch of the old house. It read, "Here, for 4 years, waited the most loyal dog in Greenfield. He taught us that hope remains alive, even in the hardest of times." Many visitors arriving there would notice the plaque and ask about its story. The townspeople would recount Buddy's tale. Some listeners were moved to tears, others felt a pang in their hearts, and still others left the place reflecting on their own lives. The abandoned house, once overlooked by everyone, became a site commemorating that long wait. Greenfield changed too. Inspired by Emily and Buddy's example, the residents organized efforts to rescue homeless animals, hold adoption events, and run awareness campaigns. It was as if the dog's experience had awakened a deeper sense of solidarity in the community. The town not only kept alive Buddy's memory, it also honored the lesson he had left behind. True love does not fade or vanish in times of difficulty. It holds fast, spans the years, and endures where you least expect it. Despite all the challenges, Buddy remained steadfast until the day of his reunion. And in that tight embrace in the middle of the street, it was clear that all his waiting had not been in vain. In his own silent way, he proved that even an animal can carry within itself a flame of hope that never goes out. His faithfulness brought people together, sparked compassion, and gave many a reason to pause and reflect. In the end, the little town of Greenfield, once anonymous, became famous because of a story of love and loyalty. A few years later, anyone walking down Maple Street would find that the house had been refurbished by a new owner who decided to honor Buddy, preserving the porch and the plaque as a symbol of hope. And if someone asked Emily whether she regretted helping Buddy reunite with his family, she would smile and say, "I only did what he taught me. He never gave up on those he loved, so I couldn't give up on him." In her heart, she held on to the memories of every moment she spent with the dog, who, without speaking a single word, showed the power of unwavering faith. Thus, the whole town understood that sometimes life puts us in difficult situations, but we should never lose hope. Buddy, just a dog in the eyes of some, touched many hearts and proved that love can endure distance, abandonment, pain, and time. Around every corner and along every street in Greenfield, the memory of that faithful gaze lived on, inviting everyone to think about how often we too need to wait, to trust, and to love without any guarantee of return. Those who knew Buddy told their children and grandchildren how he endured 4 years of cold, heat, rain, and loneliness so as not to betray the love he felt. This inspired the community to be kinder, not only to animals but to one another, because they had learned the value of those who choose to stay. Nowadays, if you stroll down Maple Street, you can still sense an energy that recalls that faithfulness. The old house is no longer abandoned, but its story resonates. It's as if Buddy is still there, sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon, reminding us that when love is real, the waiting is worth it. Some may not believe in miracles, but for the people of Greenfield, Buddy's reunion with his family was the greatest miracle they had ever witnessed. In every crack in the asphalt, every flower in the yard, and every act of kindness shared among the townsfolk, Buddy's legacy lives on. If you ever find yourself in Greenfield, hear an old-timer talk about the faithful dog on Maple Street, and see their eyes well up, remember that we don't always need words to understand the power of love. Buddy's silent wait proved that even when all seems lost, a loving heart never gives up. That is why at the moment Daniel's family returned, time seemed to stand still. Each passing car slowed down to watch. From her porch, Mrs. Mitchell folded her hands in a subtle sign of gratitude. Emily, her shirt stained with tears, stood with her parents, feeling she had done something very special. Her father, once allergic to dogs, wiped his misty eyes. Her mother, proud of her daughter, realized that behind this simple gesture of help lay the essence of everything she had always taught: kindness and empathy. In truth, Buddy was not just a dog, he became a living symbol of loyalty, uniting the whole town in his cause. Ultimately, he proved that when we find those we love, all the pain of waiting is replaced by an indescribable tenderness. In this way, Buddy's story became forever intertwined with every street in Greenfield, echoing in the lives of the townspeople who learned to cherish what truly matters, the love that endures, even when everything around us seems to say that there's no chance left. Buddy's old owners were gone, but they came back when they heard his call and they realized he had never stopped loving them. If someone were to ask you, was it all worth it? Such sacrifice, such effort, all that searching? Look at Buddy's story. See how he touched every soul that crossed his path. Recognize that love, when it is genuine, transcends reason and remains unshaken. What would have happened if Buddy had given up during the first week or month? Perhaps no one would have noticed just how admirable his persistence was. The house would likely have remained just another neglected structure, and Emily would never have had the chance to help such a faithful friend. But Buddy did not give up, and that is why he found his happy ending, that long-awaited embrace. Buddy's vigil in Greenfield left an unerasable mark. Even if rain, wind, and time wear down the house, even if the people change, the essence of that loyalty holds fast. Buddy was just a dog, but he showed that sometimes a silent gesture can speak louder than any shout. His faith in seeing his family again touched the community, brought smiles and tears, and reminded all that we each have something or someone we never want to abandon. Today, when Emily thinks about Buddy, a comforting warmth fills her heart. She knows she did the right thing, even if she missed him for a long time. And whenever she recalls Buddy's gaze, she understands that some bonds can't be broken, that they can survive any storm, because they are woven of pure love. She grew up, and the image of that dog on the porch became a treasured memory, almost a symbol of everything worth preserving in life. Thus, without ever uttering a single word, Buddy taught an entire town the real meaning of hope. Anyone hearing this story, no matter where they are, might feel their heart ache and fill with comfort at the same time, realizing that to love this profoundly, with all our strength, is not reserved for humans alone, but also for the four-legged friends who so often show us what truly matters. They say that if you travel some distant road, you might spot Buddy walking alongside Daniel. They also say that on starry nights in Greenfield, people passing by Maple Street swear they hear a joyful bark echoing in the silence, as if the porch of that house still preserved the energy of the dog who waited there for so long. The truth is that regardless of what people believe, Buddy remains alive in the memories of everyone who knew his story. And if someone asks what made that dog hold on for so long, the answer lies in the power of a bond of love that did not succumb to distance, desertion, or oblivion. Buddy stayed, and for that reason, his family returned. Emily found a new meaning to her days. The entire town rallied around a cause that seemed simple, but ultimately revealed the heart of empathy and compassion, and thus Greenfield became, forever, the town of the dog who waited. If you think about it, you might discover that a little bit of Buddy lives in all of us. Sometimes we wait for something or someone, not knowing for sure if there will be an answer. But Buddy's story shows that when that feeling is pure, it's worth it. In the end, the best reward is in the reunion, in the joyful realization that the bond was never broken. It's proof that love can still triumph, despite everything. So ended Buddy's long and silent vigil, beginning a new chapter full of embraces, pats, and the security of being with those he loved so deeply. And Greenfield, once just another sleepy town, would never forget the dog who proved that true loyalty overcomes both time and hardship. Today, his memory lingers in the stories shared by residents, a reminder that Buddy's tale still lives on in every conversation, every smile, and every hopeful heart that passes by the old house on Maple Street, where he once waited, believed, and in the end, was rewarded with a homecoming that made every heart beat a little faster.